But I remember being at Presbytery and Bill Barton giving a presentation, and he said, we have identified 2 areas in South Carolina that we would like to see a church plant. One was Carolina Forest down near Myrtle Beach, and one is in the Blythewood area. And I remember looking over at you, and you had your poker face and didn't show anything. When we got back in the van, I said, George, were you aware of this? And if you don't remember, you said, well, this is the first time that I've heard of it. And so we had Blythewood people at Northeast Presbyterian Church. I was in a small group with 423, and 3 of the 6 couples lived in the Blythewood area. And I said, well, what would it take for me to be a part of that conversation with no idea of leading the charge, just to be on the committee so that I could help whoever was going to plant the church, to introduce them to folks and whatnot. And so you got me on the M&A committee, and I traveled with Bill Barton for a year and a half talking about the church plants. And after one of the lunches, he rolled down his window of his truck and called me over, and he said, Rhett, would you consider taking the lead? And I laughed, and I thought, I'm not a pastor. I'm not a senior pastor. I'm not a church planner. Before we waste anybody's time or money, how do we know if this is a good idea? And he said, well, there's an assessment center. And at the end of it, they said, we highly recommend that you plant this church in Blythewood, but we're not recommending you as a church planner. Your gift is the community of people that God has put around you.
It's really special, though, how you had some sharp leaders from day one, already had a lot of roots in the community.
Yes.
Really made it a community church.
One of the questions that David Poole asked was, what if we start this church and 5 years later we go away? Would anybody notice, and would anybody care? And then the second question we were challenged with was, if somebody were to ask someone at a gas station coming off the interstate, what do you know about that Blythewood Presbyterian Church? What would be our reputation outside of our church? So how do people view us?
I think that the whole process of trying to come up with something as simple as a name, I can remember going through that process, and it was a collaborative thing. I mean, you talk a lot about having a body of leadership within the church body, and I think that played out.
Who was it that actually said, let's just call it Blythewood Presbyterian? Was that you, or?
No, that's too smart to have been me. It wasn't Brett, though. He wanted something.
It happened at a Blythewood community baseball game. The Galloways were there, and Aaron was asking ladies around her about, hey, we've asked to come up with a name for the church. What do you think? And one of the ladies says, I don't understand all these churches of you don't know who they are. It's just these cool names. Why don't we just call it what it is? So our mantra became, let's call it what it is, but then let's surprise them about who we are.
Oh, yeah.
So Blythewood Presbyterian, we're in Blythewood, we're a Presbyterian church.
And when we're talking about the decision of when to build, I was on strategic leadership at the time, and I can remember, one thing that stands out to me is we made a decision very early on. Rhett, you pushed hard for this, Rob Rogers and David were pushing for this, that we were, from the word go, going to put at least 10% of what came into the church out into missions.
Of course, one of the things that we are excited about at Blythewood Presbyterian Church are the ministries that we've been able to invest in. We started out at 10%, and now 15% of our tithes and offerings are set aside for our ministry partners. So we have local ministry partners that do ministry in the high school, with the needy around town, with families that are dealing with unexpected pregnancies or adoption. We have members of our church that are serving in Thailand and in Kenya. We're supporting church plant. We supported a church plant in Hexham, England, a ministry in Spain, and one of our associate pastors that was with us for 5 years that had an incredible impact. We support him in Birmingham, Alabama now. He is the campus pastor at UAB, and God has just richly blessed us to be able to be a part of ministries that's advancing the gospel on a global and local level.
Am I remembering correctly? The first building the first building project wasn't it a garden or something?
That's right, it was a greenhouse. That's right.
I've never heard of a church plant beginning with a greenhouse, but you did, didn't you?
That's right.
typically, if a church is going to buy property, the first thing you want to do is put a building on it. We did so many things before there was a building. Yes, there was the pavilion. We had a functioning greenhouse out there. Like I didn't know what hydroponics was until we were out here in the middle of April drilling metal poles into ground. I just think that is such a beautiful picture of a heartbeat of a church body that wants to be engaged in its community, to literally sink roots into its community, and to give people an opportunity to come and gather.
I just think that was so neat to use the property even before we had a church building here. I mean, we worshiped out there. Sometimes we would come out here when it was good weather and have a church out here, and just using the property. Obviously then, we had the soccer, and then elementary would have campouts here, and the youth just have the freedom to run all around, and just so many ways this property has been used. And I remember initially when we started using it, we kept finding a lot of golf balls because it was a driving range.
The fact that it was a driving range, it was already beautiful. It had green grass on it, the trees were cleared, and Ann and I would walk around the property, and our prayer literally was, Lord, this is beautiful, help us not mess it up.
And a lot of examples, Brett, you love to use but God in your sermons. The property and the move from the high school was great examples of but God, because we couldn't afford the high school anymore, but God had already given us this piece of property. We couldn't afford to put a giant building on it, but God gave us enough resources to build a pavilion. Even when we got to the capital campaign, but God came through in ways that we all thought was an amazing stretch. But I think what stands out to me about that is, even though we were stretched and God poured out blessings to be able to build the building, there's so many costs we didn't incur even on this property. Like the fact it was a driving range. We didn't have to clear anything. We didn't have to grade in the way that you would have otherwise.
The inspiration came from, what was the event we did at Trinity United Methodist Church in their youth building?
Had a vision night or something.
It was a vision night.
Yeah, we had a dinner.
And they had just built that new youth building, and it's not huge, at least compared to the other parts of their facility. And we're like, oh, this is the right size. We could handle this size. It's got a little sanctuary and some rooms for Sunday school and all that. And I think that was sort of the inspiration of, well, maybe we can do this.
I think the pastor of any church is what kind of really leads things, and people kind of follow that example. And I think Rhett has been really authentic, and really I think all of the church leadership has been that way. And when you get a level of transparency, I think in preaching and just being faithful to the word. Authenticity is really, that's a key word.
Also, we've been through nationally a contentious time frame in the last 10 years, and I don't feel like those contentions have really hit home within our congregation, and that just means a lot that we are present for each other in very practical ways. We do share our joys and our problems, and we feed families when they are sick or have babies, and our deacons show up and take care of people, and there's a lot of practical care that I think every member can benefit from.
But it's organic to what our
Right.
culture is here, because I think that's why it draws the community in, because that's what brought us. We moved here to Blythewood, and we prayed that we had family here. That's what brought us back to Columbia. And when we got here, we just found ourselves, spread out across all the family in Columbia and wanted to be everywhere. And the Lord is so pressed on our heart that to grow in this community that He had planted us in Blythewood. And so we prayed and dived into the community of soccer, the BBC, before we even visited the church. I think we were in soccer, and I think we even came to VBS. We hadn't even visited. It's just been such an abundant blessing in our life, because it's some of the most, the grit and the authenticity here.
Blythewood Presbyterian Church has been so richly blessed with so many people that have taken ownership and that have come alongside either up front or behind the scenes. When we were in the high school for years, and it was a heavy lift. I mean, we had our worship team that was storing stuff in their garage and having to bring it over, drum sets. We had a whole trailer full of stuff that had to be brought in for the nursery and for the elementary. We had men that would drive the trailer over. We had a crew of people that would unload it and set it up and then load it back up afterwards. We have folks that have a heart for the community that are engaged either directly through our church or in other ways. We have folks obviously behind the soundboard. We've had folks on the stage now doing 2 services. Those that have worked in the nursery every week, that's 52 Sundays out of the year that we have to cover the nursery, and those that work with our elementary, our youth. God has richly blessed us. There are families that have been with us for a short period of time that have had such a great impact, and you know who you are. God has blessed us with Army chaplains that have been able to preach for us or just be a part of our church service. And again, from the disc golf course to all the committees, leadership, elders, our deacons, youth directors. Wow, I just am blown away by how many people have rolled up their sleeves, have come alongside this church for the building of God's kingdom, for the advancement of the gospel. To Him be the glory. I'm just so amazed. Now to Him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to His power that is at work within us, to Him be the glory in the church, in Christ Jesus, throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen.